Hi everybody. Today's discussion is about yeast bread. By the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to identify the functions and importance of specific ingredients in yeast bread, and you'll also be able to explain how sugar and salt interact with yeast. So let's get started. We know that yeast bread is science. There are 5 ingredients that have to be inside of our bread in order for it to function properly. The first one we talked about was flour. We know that flour provides structure. It also includes the gluten that, once activated, provides strength and elasticity to our dough. We also know that inside of yeast bread we have to have yeast. This is our leavening agent. However, this leavening agent, our yeast, is alive. It's a living organism, and it needs certain things in order to feed it and to wake it up in order for it to do the thing it needs to do. So, when we talk about yeast, we know it's kind of like a baby. It likes to be warm, so we're going to use warm water. Remember, we talked about it needing to be between 105 and 115 degrees. That way it's warm enough to wake up, but not too hot to kill it, right? And we also need sugar. Sugar, remember, is its food. Now, yeast will eat and eat and eat until it can't eat anymore. And as it's eating, it creates these CO2 bubbles that create a nice foam, which is also, once they're trapped, what causes our bread dough to rise. Okay, so the sugar is our food for the yeast. But we don't want that yeast eating too much, right? So we also need a little bit of salt. The salt, though in most baked goods, is really just for flavoring. In yeast bread, it's very important because it acts as a regulator. So the yeast will just eat, but the salt is the thing that tells it to stop eating. Don't eat that much. So today, we're going to do a science experiment to show just how salt and sugar interact with the yeast to allow it to eat, but maybe not eat too much. And then we're going to talk about what that does to our bread dough. By the end of today's experiment, you'll be able to see just how sugar and salt interact with yeast. You'll be able to see this based on the amount of foam that's created in each of the glasses based on the ingredients that we add in. Now remember that yeast eats, and as it eats, it creates a CO2 release. And this is going to create our foam today, but it's also what allows the bread to rise as that foam is trapped inside. So let's see what happens. In our experiment, I've already added in an equal amount of yeast into all 4 glasses, and I've also poured in a half of a cup of warm water at 114 degrees, the perfect temperature to wake up that yeast and warm it up. So let's go ahead and add in our salt and sugar. In our first glass, we're not going to add any salt and sugar. This will be our control glass to see what yeast does on its own without any food. In our second glass, we're going to only add in salt without sugar. So we'll add in 1 teaspoon of salt. Mix it up. In our third glass, we're going to add only sugar. So we'll add in 1 teaspoon of sugar and mix it up. In our fourth glass, we're going to add in both the salt and the sugar. So we'll do a half of a teaspoon of salt and a half of a teaspoon of the sugar and mix it up. Now we have to wait about 20 minutes to allow that yeast time to eat up that food and to see how much foam is created. Be prepared to make predictions on which glass is going to create the most foam. It's been 20 minutes. Let's see how much foam was created by our yeast. We'll start with our first one, where we didn't add any salt or sugar. Take 5 seconds to make your predictions. Do you think there'll be no foam, medium amount of foam, or a lot of foam? If you said no foam, then you're correct. We didn't add any food for our yeast. So although it's nice and warm and awake from our warm water, it had nothing to eat and couldn't create any CO2 or foam. Let's go to glass number 2, where we only added salt. Take 5 seconds to make your predictions. Do you think there'll be no foam, a medium amount of foam, or a lot of foam? If you said no foam, then you're correct again. Remember that salt is not food for our yeast. If there's no food here, then there's no CO2 that will be released, and then no foam. Salt acts as a regulator. Salt is the one that says, stop eating all that food. So there's no foam here. Let's go to glass number 3, where we only added sugar. Take 5 seconds to make your predictions. No foam, medium foam, or a lot of foam. If you said a lot of foam, then you are correct. Remember that sugar is food for our yeast, and there's nothing here to tell it to stop eating. So it's going to eat all the sugar it can find and continue to release more and more CO2 and create that foam. So you can see here all those CO2 bubbles that have been created. Finally, let's talk about our last glass that has salt and sugar inside of it. Take 5 seconds to make your predictions. Is it going to be no foam, a medium amount of foam, or a lot of foam? If you said a medium amount of foam, then you are correct. It does have sugar, which is our food for our yeast, but it also has salt, which is going to regulate it and say, stop eating all that food. So instead of eating and eating and eating until it can't eat anymore, it has a regulator inside of it. So if we compare the two, just the sugar and the kind that has sugar and salt, you'll see that with the sugar, it definitely created more CO2 and foam. Based on today's experiment, come to class ready to discuss your predictions on what might happen to our yeast bread dough if we forget to either add in the salt or if we forget to add in the sugar. Make sure that you're ready to explain why. Have a great day.